2. In the Fog, Number 2. The Story of the Queen's Messenger. The necklace was a present from the Queen of England to the Czarina of Russia, began the Queen's Messenger. It was to celebrate the occasion of the Tsar's coronation. Our foreign officer knew that the Russian ambassador to Paris was to proceed to Moscow for that ceremony, and I was directed to go to him in Paris in order to hand over the necklace. But when I reached Paris, I found that he was not expecting me for a week later, and was taking a few days' vacation in Nice. His people asked me to leave the necklace with them at the embassy, but I had been charged to get the receipts from it from the ambassador himself, so I started at once to Nice. The fact that Monte Carlo was not 2,000 miles from Nice may have had something to do with me making and carry out my instructions so carefully. Now, how the Princess Zichy came to find out about the necklace I don't know, but I can guess. As you have just heard, she was at one time a spy at the service of the Russian government, and after they dismissed her, she kept up her acquaintances with many of the Russian agents in London. It was probably through one of them that she learned the necklace was to be sent to Moscow, and the Queen's messengers had been detailed to take it there. Still, I doubt even that knowledge would have helped her if she had not also known something which I suppose no one else in the world knew but myself and the other man. And curiously enough, the other man was the Queen's messenger too, and a friend of mine. You must know that, up to the time of this robbery, I had always concealed my dispatches in a matter of particularly my own. I got the idea from that play called A Scrap of Paper. In it, a man wants to hide a certain compromising document. He knows that all his rooms will be secretly searched for it, so he prints on a torn envelope and sticks it up anywhere we can see it on the mantel shelf. The result of the woman who is ransacking the house to find it looks in all unlikely places but passes over the scrap paper that is under her nose. Sometimes the papers or packages they give to carry in Europe are of great value, and sometimes are special makes of cigarettes and orders to court dressmakers. Sometimes we know what we are carrying, and sometimes we do not. If it is a large sum of money or treaty, they generally tell us, but as a rule, we have no knowledge of what the package contains, so to be on the safe side, we naturally take just as great care of it as though we held the terms of ultimatum or the crown jewels. As a rule, my confreres carry the official packages in a dispatch box, which is just as obvious to the lady's jewel bag in the hands of her maid. Everyone knows they are carrying something of value. They put a premium on dishonesty. Well, after I saw the scrap of paper play, I determined to put the government valuables in one of the most unlikely places that anyone would look for them. So I used to hide documents they gave me inside my riding boots or in small articles like jewelry or money. And I carried an old cigar case. After I took to using my case for that purpose, I bought a new one, exactly like it, for my cigars. But to avoid mistakes, I had my initials placed on both sides of the new one, and the moment I touched the case, even in the dark, I could tell which one it was by the raised initials. No one knew about this except the Queen's messenger of whom I spoke. We once left Paris together on the Orient Express, and I was going to Constantinople and he was to stop at Vienna. On the journey I told him of my peculiar way of hiding things and showed him my cigar case. If I recollect rightly, on that trip it was Grand Cross at St. Michael's and St. George which the Queen was sending to our ambassador. The messenger was very much entertained by my scheme, and some months later, when he met the princess, he told her about it in an amusing story. Of course, she had no idea that he was a Russian spy, and that didn't know anything at all about her, except that she was a very attractive woman. It was indiscreet, but he could not possibly have guessed that she could ever make any use of what he had told her. Later, after the robbery, I remembered that I had informed the young chap of my secret hiding place, and when I saw him distressed and said he had never seen the importance of the secret, He remembered he had told several people about it, and among others, the Princess Zichy. In that way, I found out that it was she who had wronged me, and I know that from the moment I had left London she was following me, and that she knew that the diamonds were concealed in my cigar case. My train for Nice left Paris at 10 in the morning. When I travel at night, I generally tell the chef de gare that I am a queen's messenger, and he gives me the compartment to myself. But in the daytime, I take whatever offers. On the morning, I had found an empty compartment, and I had tipped the guard to keep everybody else out, not from any fear of losing the diamonds, but because I wanted to smoke. I had locked the door, and at the last bell had rung, I supposed to have a travel alone, so I began to arrange my traps and make myself comfortable. The diamonds in my cigar case were in the inside pocket of my waistcoat, and as they made a bulky package, I took them out, intending to put them back in my handbag. It is a small satchel, like a bookmaker's, or those handbags the couriers carry. I wear it slung from a strap across my shoulder, and no matter whether I'm sitting or walking, it never leaves me. I took the cigar case which held the necklace from my inside pocket and the case which held the cigars out of the satchel, and while I was searching through it for a box of matches, I laid the two cases beside me on the seat. At that moment the train started, but at the same instant there was a rattle at my lock in the compartment, and a couple of porters lifted and shoved a woman through the door and buried her bags at her and umbrellas after her. Instinctively, I reached for the diamonds and shoved them quickly into the satchel, and pushing them far down at the bottom of the bag, snatched the lock spring. Then I put my cigars in my pocket of my coat, but with the thought that now I had a woman as a traveling companion, I should probably not be allowed to enjoy them. One of her pieces of luggage had fallen at my feet, and a roll of rugs was handed to my side. I thought if I hid the fact that the lady was not welcome and at once started to be civil, she might permit me to smoke. So I picked up her handbag off the floor and asked her where I might place it. As I spoke, she looked at her face for the first time and saw that she was a most remarkably handsome woman. She smiled charmingly and begged me not to disturb myself. Then she arranged her own things about her and, opening her dressing bag, took out a gold cigarette case. "Do you mind if I smoke?" she said. I laughed and assured her that I had been in great terror lest she might not allow me to smoke. "Do you like cigarettes?" she said. "Will you try some of these? They're rolled especially for my husband in Russia, and they are supposed to be very good." I thanked her for one and took one from her case, and I found it so much better than my own that I continued to smoke her cigarettes throughout the rest of the journey. I must say that we had got on very well. I judged from the coronet on her cigarette case, and from her manner, which was quite well bred, that any woman I had ever met, that she was somewhat of importance, and though she seemed to be too good-looking to be respectable, I determined that she was some grande dame who so assured herself of her position that she could afford to be unconventional. At first she read her novel, and then she made some comment on the scenery, and finally we began to discuss the current politics of the continent. She talked of all the cities of Europe and seemed to know everyone worth knowing, but she volunteered nothing about herself except that she frequently made use of the expression, "when my husband was stationed in Vienna," or "when my husband was promoted to Rome." And once she said to me, "I have often seen you at Monte Carlo. I've seen when you won the pigeon championship." I told her that it was not a pigeon shot, and she gave a little start of surprise. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she said. "I thought you were Morton Hamilton, the English champion." As a matter of fact, I do look something like Hamilton, but I know now that her object was to make me think that she had no idea who I actually was. She needn't have acted at all, for I certainly had no suspicions, and was only too pleased to have so charming a companion. The one thing that should have made me suspicious was the fact that every station she made some trivial excuse to get me out of the compartment. She pretended that her maid was traveling behind us on the second-class carriages, and kept saying that she could not imagine why the woman did not come look for her, and if my maid could not turn up the next stop, should I be very kind to get out and bring her whatever it was she pretended that she needed. I had taken my dressing case from the rack to get out of my novel and had left it in the seat opposite of mine. And at the end of the compartment furthest from her, once I came back from buying her a cup of chocolate or some other fool errand, I found her standing at my end of the compartment with both hands in my dressing bag. She looked at me without so much as winking an eye and shoved the case carefully into a corner. "Your bag slipped on the floor," she said. "If you've got any bottles in it, you had better look to see if they're not broken." And I give you my word, I was such an ass that I did not open the case and look through it. She must have thought I was real juggins. I got hot all over whenever I remember it. But in spite of my dullness and her cleverness, I shouldn't gain anything by sending me away, because what she wanted was in the handbag, and every time she sent me away, the handbag went with me. After the incident with the dressing case, her manner began to change. Either she had had time to look through it in my absence, or when I was examining through it for broken bottles, she had seen everything it held. From that moment, she must have known for certain that the cigar case in which she knew I carried the diamonds in was in the bag that was fastened to my body, and from that time she was probably plotting on how to get it from me. Her anxiety became almost apparent. She dropped her great lady manner, and her charming discontention went on. She ceased talking, and when I spoke, answered me irritably or at random. No doubt her mind was entirely consumed with her plan. At the end of our journey was drawing rapidly near, and her time for action was being cut down with the speed of the express train. Even I, unsuspicious as I was, noticed that something was very wrong with her. I really believe that before we reached Marseille, if I had not, through my own stupidity, given her the chance she wanted, she might have stuck a knife in me and rolled me out of the rails. But as it was, I only thought that the long journey had tired her. I suggested that it was a very tedious trip and asked her if she would allow us to offer some of my cognac. She thanked me and said no, and then suddenly her eyes lighted and she exclaimed, Yes, thank you, if you will be so kind." My flask was in my handbag, and I placed it on my lap, and with my thumb I slipped back the catch. I keep my tickets and the railroad guide in my bag, so I am constantly opening it so that I never bother to lock it. And the fact that it was strapped to me has always been sufficient protection. But I can appreciate now what satisfaction, what torment too, it must have been to that woman when she saw that the bag opened without a key. While we were crossing the mountains, I had felt rather chilly and had been wearing a light racing coat. But after the lamps were lighted, the compartment became very warm and stuffy, and I found out my coat was uncomfortable. So I stood up, and after first slipping my strap off the bag over my head, I placed the bag on the seat next to me and pulled off the racing coat. I don't blame myself for being careless. The bag was still within reach of my hand, and nothing would have happened if at the exact moment the train had not stopped at ours. It was a combination of my removing the bag and our entering the station at the same instant which gave Princess Zichy the chance she wanted to rob me. I needn't say that she was clever enough to take it. The train ran at the station at full speed and came to a sudden stop. I had just thrown my coat onto the rack and had reached out my hand for the bag. In another instant I should have had the strap over my shoulder. But at that moment the princess threw open the door of my compartment and beckoned wildly at the people on the platform. "Natalie, Natalie," she called. "Natalie, here I am. Come here, this way." She turned upon me with great excitement. "My maid," she cried. "She is looking for me. She passed the window without seeing me. Go, please, and bring her back." She continued pointing out the door and beckoning me to her other hand. There certainly was something about that woman's tone which made one jump. When she was giving orders, you had no chance to think of anything else, so I rushed out on my errand of mercy, and rushed back again to ask what the maid looked like. "In black," she answered, rising and blocking the door of the compartment. "Oh, in black, with a bonnet." The train wasted 3 minutes at Aries, and in that time I suppose I must have rushed up to the 27 women and asked, "Are you Natalie?" The only reason I wasn't punched with an umbrella or handed over to some guard must have been that they probably thought I was crazy. When I jumped back into the compartment and the princess was seated where I had left her, her eyes were burning with happiness. She placed her hand on my arm almost affectionately and said in a most hysterical way, "You are very kind to me. I am sorry to have troubled you." I protested that every woman on the platform was dressed in black. "Indeed, I am so sorry," she said, laughing. And she continued to laugh until she began to breathe so quickly that I thought she was going to faint. I can see now that the last part of the journey must have been a terrible half hour for her. She had the cigar case safe enough, but she knew that she herself was not safe. If I were to open my bag, even at the last minute, and miss the case, I should know positively that she had taken it. I had placed the diamonds in the bag at the very moment she entered the compartment, but no one but the two other selves had occupied it since. She knew that when we reached Marseille, she would either be 20,000 pounds richer than she had left Paris, or that she would go to jail. That was the situation as she must have read it, and I don't envy her state of mind during that last half hour. It must have been hell. I saw that something was wrong, and in my innocence I even wondered if possibly my cognac had not been a little too strong. For she suddenly developed into a most brilliant conversationalist and applauded and laughed at everything I said, even firing off questions at me like a machine gun, so that I had no time to think of anything else but what she was saying. Whenever I stirred, she stopped her chattering and leaned forward to me and watched me like a cat over a mouse hole. I wondered how I could have not considered her an agreeable traveling companion. I thought I should have preferred to be locked in with a lunatic. I don't like to think how she would have acted had I made a move to examine the bag, but as I had it safely strapped around me again, I did not open it, and I reached Marseille alive. As we drove to the station, she shook hands with me and grinned like a Cheshire cat. "I cannot tell you," she said, "how much I have to thank you for." "How do you like that for impudence?" I offered to put her in a carriage, but she said that she must find Natalie, that she had hoped to meet again at the hotel. So I drove off by myself, wondering who she was and whether Natalie was her keeper or not. I had to wait several hours for the train to Nice, and I had waited to stroll around the city. I thought I had better put the diamonds in the safe at the hotel. As soon as I reached my room, I locked the door and placed the handbag on the table and opened it. I felt among the things on top of it, but failed to touch the cigar case. I shoved my hand in deeper and settled the earrings about, and I still had not reached it. A cold wave swept down my spine, and a sort of emptiness came to the pit of my stomach. Then I turned red hot, and the sweat sprang out all over me. I wetted my lips with my tongue and said to myself, "Don't be an ass. Pull yourself together. Pull yourself together. Take the things out, one at a time. It's there. Of course it's there. Don't be an ass." So I put my brake on my nerves and began carefully picking out the things one by one. But after 5 seconds I could not stand it an instant, and I rushed across the room and threw everything on the bed. But the diamonds were not among them. I pulled the things about and tore them open and shuffled and rearranged and sorted them, but it was no use. The cigar case was gone. I threw everything in the dressing case out on the floor, though I knew it was useless to look for it there. I knew that I had put it in the bag. I sat down and tried to think. I remembered I had put it in the satchel in Paris just as the woman had entered the compartment, and I had been alone with her ever since, so it was she who had robbed me. But how? It had never left my shoulder, and then I remembered that I had taken it off when I had changed my coat for the few moments that I was searching for Natalie. I remembered the woman had sent me on that goose chase, and at every other station she had tried to get rid of me for some fool errand. I gave a roar like a mad bull and jumped down the 6 steps at a time. I demanded the office as if a distinguished lady traveler, possibly a Russian, had just entered the hotel. As I expected, she had not. I sprang into a cab and inquired at two other hotels, and then I saw the folly of trying to catch her without outside help, and I ordered the fellow to go up to the police office of the chief of police. I told my story, and the ass in charge asked me to calm myself down and wanted to take notes. I told him this was no time for note-taking, but for doing something. He got wrathy at that and demanded to be taken at once to his chief. The chief, he said, was very busy and could not see me, so I showed him my silver greyhound. In 11 years I had never used it but once before. I stated in pretty vigorous language that I was the Queen's messenger, and that if the chief of police did not see me instantly, he would lose his official head. The fellow jumped off his high horse at that and ran with me to his chief. A smart young chap, a colonel in the army, and a very intelligent man. I explained that I had been robbed in a French railway carriage of a diamond necklace that belonged to the Queen of England, which Her Majesty was sending as a present to the Czarina of Russia. I pointed out to him that if he succeeded in capturing the thief, he would be made for life and would receive the gratitude of 3 great powers. He wasn't the sort that thinks second thoughts are best. He saw the Russian and French decorations spouting out all over his chest, and he hit a bell and pressed buttons and yelled out orders to the captain like a penny steamer in the fog. He sent out a description to all the city gates and ordered all cabmen and railway porters to search the trains leaving Marseille. He ordered all passengers on outgoing vessels to be examined and telegraphed the proprietaries of every exchange and pension to send him a complete list of their guests within an hour. While I was standing there, he must have given at least 100 orders and sent out enough commissaires, sergeants de ville, and gardes bicycle police, and plainclothes Johnnies to have captured the entire German army. When they had gone, he assured me that the woman was as good as arrested already. Indeed, officially, she was arrested, for she had no more chance of escape from Marseille than I of the Chateau d'If. He told me to return to my hotel and possess my soul in peace. Within an hour, he assured me that he would acquaint me with her arrest. I thanked him and complimented him on his energy and left him, but I didn't share in his confidence. I felt that she was a very clever woman and a match for any and all of us. It was very well for him to be jubilant. He had not lost his diamonds, and had everything to gain if he found them, while I, even if he did recover the necklace, should only be where I was before I lost it. And if he did not recover it, I was a ruined man. It was an awful facer for me. I had always prided myself on my record. In 11 years I had never mislaid an envelope nor missed taking the first train. And now I had failed in the most important commission that had ever been entrusted to me. And it wasn't a thing that could be hushed up either. It was too conspicuous, too spectacular. It was sure to invite the wildest notoriety. I saw myself ridiculed all over the continent, perhaps dismissed, even suspected of having taken the thing myself. I was walking in front of a lighted cafe, and I felt so sick and miserable that I stopped for a pick-me-up. Then I considered that if I took one drink, I should probably, in my present state of mind, not want to stop another 20. And I decided I had better leave it alone. But my nerves were jumping like those of a frightened rabbit, and I felt I must have something to quiet them, or I shall go crazy. I reached for my cigarette case, and the cigarette seemed handily adequate, so I put it back again and took out my cigar case, in which I only keep the strongest and blackest of cigars. I opened it and stuck my fingers in, but instead of a cigar, they touched on a thin leather envelope. My heart stood perfectly still. I did not dare to look, but I dug my fingernails across the letters and felt the layers of the thin paper, and then a layer of cotton. Then they scratched on the facets of the Czarina's diamonds. I stumbled as though I had been hit in the face and fell back into one of the chairs on the pavement. I tore off the wrappings and spread the diamonds out on the cafe table. I could not believe they were real. I twisted the necklace between my fingers and crushed it between my palms and tossed it up into the air. I believe I almost kissed it. The women in the cafe stood up in chairs to see better and laughed and screamed, and people crowded so close around me that people and the waiters had to form a bodyguard. The proprietor thought there was a fight and he called for the police. I was so happy I didn't care. I laughed too and gave the proprietor a handful of coin and told him to stand everyone a drink. Then I tumbled into a fire and galloped off to my friend, the chief of police. I felt very sorry for him. He had been so happy at the chance I had given him, and he would be so disappointed when he learned that I had sent him off on a false alarm. But now that I had the necklace, I did not want him to find the woman. Indeed, I was most anxious that she should get clear away, for if she were caught, the truth would come out, and I was likely to get a sharp reprimand and be sure to be laughed at. I could see now how it had happened. In my haste to hide the diamonds when the woman had hustled into the carriage, I had shoved the cigars into the satchel, and now the diamonds into my pocket of my coat. Now that I had the diamonds safe again, it seems like a natural mistake, but I doubted if the Foreign Office would think so. I was afraid it might not appreciate the beautiful simplicity of my secret hiding place. So when I reached the police station and found the princess still at large, I was more relieved. As I expected, the chief was extremely chagrined when he learned of my mistake and that there was nothing for him to do. But I was feeling so happy myself that I hated to give anyone less miserable. So I suggested that this attempt to steal the Czarina's necklace might be only the first of a series of such attempts. And that I might still be in danger from an unscrupulous game. I winked at the chief, and the chief smiled at me, and we went to ice together in a saloon car, with a guard of 12 carabiners and 12 plainclothes men, and the chief and I drank champagne all the way. We marched together up the hotel where the Russian ambassador was stopping, closely surrounded by our escort of carabiners, and delivered the necklace with the most profound ceremony. The old ambassador was immensely impressed, and when he hinted that already I had been made the object of attack by robbers, he assured us that His High Imperial Majesty would not prove ungrateful. I wrote a swinging personal letter about the invaluable services of the chief of the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that they gave him enough Russian and French medals to satisfy even a French soldier. So though he never caught the woman, he received his just reward. The Queen's messenger paused and surveyed the faces of those about him in some embarrassment. But the worst of it is, he added, that the story must have got about, for while the princess obtained nothing from me but a cigar case and 5 excellent cigars, a few weeks after the coronation of the Tsar sent me a gold cigar case with his monogram in diamonds. And I don't know yet whether that was coincidence or whether the Tsar wanted me to know that he knew that I had been carrying the Czarina's diamonds in my pigskin cigar case. What do you fellows think?